Hi there, Chris, Chap and the Cap, Motolegends. Today I want to talk about laminated membranes. I want to talk about what they are and how they work. And in particular, I want to go through the differences between what we call a laminated membrane and a drop liner membrane, because those are the two forms of construction. They're the two most common forms of construction for a waterproof motorcycle garment. Now, if you're the kind of rider who takes a keen interest in the gear that you ride in, you may already know all about laminated membranes, and if this is the case, you might as well just stop here. Go do something else, go polish the bike, go out for a ride, because what follows is going to be of absolutely no interest to you. But there is still a lot of confusion out there and a lot of misunderstanding rather about the benefits and the downsides of laminated membranes. Before perhaps we can understand how a laminated membrane works, we need to understand how a membrane works. Now, a membrane is basically a super thin sheet, and it's got millions of tiny little holes in. Those holes are so small that the raindrops that hit you when you're running along can't pass through the membrane. And that's why we stay dry. We stay dry on the inside of the membrane. But those holes are sufficiently large to allow our sweat to escape. So when we sweat, sweating brings moisture to the surface of the skin. To cool down, that moisture has to turn from a liquid state into a gaseous state. And when it does that, it creates energy that draws heat away from the body. But that sweat has to be able to escape, that moisture has to be able to escape, and it escapes through those millions of little holes in the membrane. If we had a membrane that had no holes in it at all, we would stay perfectly dry from the outside, but you'd be wearing a plastic bag, and what would happen is you'd get just as wet from the inside. With a laminated garment, the membrane is bonded to the inside of the outer fabric of the jacket or pant. This is an old rucker jacket that we've cut up, and as you can see here, the black stuff, that's the abrasion resistant outer, the grey stuff, that's the membrane, and it is bonded, heat sealed, adhered to the outer fabric of the jacket. Importantly, the membrane, this grey stuff, is exactly the same as the membrane that you would get in a drop liner garment. The difference is that the membrane in a drop liner garment is not bonded, it hangs down independently. So here is a drop liner garment, another old rucker garment, and in this case, this outer material, the green material, that's the abrasion resistant outer fabric, and this is the membrane that just hangs down independently. What happens with a drop liner garment? The membrane is sewn in to the shoulders and the upper parts of the arms. In a pant, it would be sewn into the waistline, and it basically hangs down independently, and that's why it's called a drop liner, because the membrane drops and hangs down. Both forms of membrane, importantly, will keep you just as dry. In both cases, the rain cannot pass through the membrane because it's the same membrane. So again, the holes are too small to allow the rain to come in, but the holes are big enough to allow our sweat to escape. The difference is that with a drop liner garment, the water can pass, in rain, water can pass through the outer fabric. So this is the outer fabric. In heavy rain, this is going to become soaking wet. Water can pass through this. It's not going to reach the body, but it can pass through the outer fabric. That cannot happen with a laminated garment because the membrane is bonded to the outer surface. Rain can't find its way into the garment at all. What that means is that a laminated garment, be it a jacket or a pant, will never become soaking wet. It will never become absolutely drenched. It won't reach a state that we call wet out. So a laminated jacket, or indeed a laminated pant, brings a number of advantages. Because it's never going to get waterlogged, it will dry out much faster. That's important, for example, if you're a daily commuter. Let's say you've got an hour's commute into the office in the morning, hour in the evening. You ride in one day, it rains heavily. No jacket would become wet out totally in an hour's ride, but in a laminated garment, that jacket or pant is going to dry out within an hour or so. So when it comes to going home, you're going to be putting on a bone dry garment. Similarly, if we're talking about riding in heavy rain, let's say you're on the motorway, you're riding for 4 or 5 hours, a laminated garment is going to stay relatively dry because it's not taking water on. And that's important because a dry garment is going to be nicer to wear, it's not going to chafe, it's not going to get heavy, but importantly, a dry garment will keep you warm because as you're riding along on the motorway, if you've got this wall of water around you, your body heat is going to escape more easily because heat transmits from the body some 20 times faster through a wet medium than through a dry medium. So in heavy rain, a laminated garment is going to be a warmer one to wear than a drop liner one. So actually, contrary to popular opinion, many of the benefits that come from laminated gear have nothing to do with staying dry on the bike. They come from how little the garments take on. But there are some downsides to laminated gear. Firstly, they tend to be they jackets or pants, they tend to be less comfortable because when you bond or heat seal this membrane onto another fabric, it makes it stiffer. So if I were to compare this ruck of fabric on this jacket, this is a laminated jacket, it's kind of crispy and crunchy, not particularly cosseting. If I take this rucker jacket with a drop liner membrane and I take the membrane and the outer fabric, it's just much softer, it's going to mold to the body, it's much more pliable. Some laminated membranes are known as 3-layer membranes. The most famous is a 3-layer Gore-Tex Pro Shell membrane, top end of all membranes. And what happens here is you take the outer fabric, you've got the membrane bonded onto the outer fabric, and then you bond a third layer in. It kind of sandwiches the membrane. And what that does, it makes for a more robust and longer lasting membrane. But these garments tend to be even less comfortable because you've gone from 2 layers to 3 layers. It becomes even stiffer, even crunchier. The bottom line is that laminated garments are not necessarily nice to ride in. Lamination wasn't developed to be comfortable, it was developed to do a particular job for a particular kind of rider. Now the comfort factor is just not to be dismissed because a lot of us ride for fun. We ride a bike because we want to go out and enjoy ourselves. And a drop liner garment is just going to be more comfortable, more enjoyable to ride in. We're going to be more relaxed on the bike, we're going to be more mobile moving around the bike, and we're potentially going to therefore ride better. There's another factor that affects the comfort when it comes to laminate versus drop liner, and that is drop liner garments are warmer because the way the membrane is arranged behind the outer fabric, there's an air gap, and what that air gap does, it traps heat. So a drop liner garment is going to be much warmer in cold weather. That is different to what I said a minute ago about a laminated jacket being warmer, but a laminated jacket is warmer in wet weather because it's not taking up as much moisture, but in dry weather, in dry cold weather, you're actually warmer in a drop liner product. There is though one key benefit to laminated clothing that has absolutely nothing to do with waterproofing and staying dry and so on. Rather, it's to do with venting. And it comes down to the fact that when you open a vent, you open the zip in a vent on a drop liner garment, you open the vent, you've got a waterproof membrane inside, and that is going to impede the flow of air. Now, when the air comes in, you will still get a kind of cooling effect. It will move air around the body, but it won't be particularly efficient. By contrast, because the membrane is bonded onto the outer surface of a laminated garment, when you have a vent in a laminated garment, such as here, the air can pass straight through to the body and it's going to be much more effective. So it has to be acknowledged that if you have a 4-inch vent in a drop liner garment and you have a 4-inch vent in a laminated garment, the venting through the 4-inch vent in the laminated garment is going to be much more effective. So in hot weather, there is certainly an advantage to a laminate. In summary, therefore, what are the upsides, what are the downsides of laminated motorcycle clothing? The prime benefit comes from the fact that laminated gear does not soak up the rain as much. What that means is that if you're riding in heavy rain, you will stay warmer. As a commuter, if you have a laminated product, you're always going to have a dry jacket when you come home in the evening. But by the same token, laminated garments are less comfortable, and in dry conditions as opposed to wet ones, they are less warm to ride in. Laminated garments, we have to acknowledge, vents better, so in hotter weather you're going to be cooler in a laminated garment. Another issue, however, that cannot be ignored is that laminated garments are horribly complex to make, or rather they are when they are made properly, and that's because there's an enormous amount of taping that goes into making a laminated garment. So if we look at this up and down the sleeves, all this tape, every few inches there's an extra piece of tape, there's taping around the pockets, there's taping over any embroidery. when you make a laminated garment and you do it properly, it is very, very labour intensive. And what we know is that anything that is labour intensive, that is time, time equals money. So on a like-for-like basis, a laminated garment will always be more expensive than a similarly spec'd drop liner garment. And we here have certainly seen this recently with the new Comfo R suit from Rucker. That's a £1,000 suit, more or less, and that has a much better spec than the similarly priced Calyx 2, which is a laminated garment. Now, there's another truth here when it comes to talking about laminated garments, and it's kind of related to the same issue of cost and complexity, and that is that cheap, really cheap laminated gear tends not to work. Now, it might pass muster to begin with, and we've tried a number of these suits and we've been very excited when we've first come across them, but ultimately the taping is not done sufficiently well and they just don't last. Before too long, they tend to fail. So if you want to go laminated, go for it. We've got no issues with that. But if you want to really enjoy the benefits of laminated, don't go too cheap. Here at Motolegends, we are, as you might expect, big fans of laminates. We sell a lot of laminated gear, probably more than anyone in the country. But laminated is better for most people, probably on 1% of their rides, maybe even less than that. There is, however, another way to enjoy the benefits of laminate for a lot less money and without enduring the discomfort of laminates, and that is to buy a drop liner garment, and when you are going to be in heavy rain for many hours, you wear a waterproof over the top. Or if you're commuting into work, you buy a drop liner garment, and for that day where you think it's going to rain all the way in, you put, again, a waterproof over the top. Now, this gives you in some ways the best of both worlds, because you've got the comfort of a drop liner, but if you're in the rain for many hours and it rains hard, the garment underneath, in other words, your drop liner garment, doesn't get wet at all. So you take it off and underneath, the drop liner garment is actually bone dry. And that's even better than a laminated garment, because a laminated garment is going to get damp, but when you've worn a waterproof, this stays bone dry. So actually, if you want the benefits of laminate without spending the money, without compromising comfort, our view is that you should look at getting a drop liner garment and just wear a waterproof over the top. So in summary, we are big fans of laminate. And for some people, it is the right solution. And I would suggest that for some people, and some people who come into the shop here and talk to us, we are very frank with them and we tell them it's the only solution for you. Your life is going to be hell if you do not have a laminated garment. But whilst it's best for some, the truth is it's certainly not best for everyone.